Hello, and welcome to episode 9 review, which is the last episode of the season 1 and covers them walking to the hospital and then Jackson. But there was a an extra scene thrown in there, and that was the very beginning of the episode. It had to do with basically Ellie's origins, her birth, and the whole reason why she's immune. I kind of like whole the reason why she's immune in the show better than the game. The game is basically just just for some reason are somehow mutated. It's why she's immune. I kind of like the logic of what the show had to say a little bit better, which was basically well it starts with Ellie's mom, Anna, probably just running away from an infected or something. Don't really know the context as of what she's running away from. And yeah, played by Ellie herself, Ashley Johnson. And there's no non-weird way to say this, but just Ashley Johnson, just like being out of breath and just grunting through the woods, like even giving birth, all like the breathing and the grunts. It's like it's Ellie, because especially in part 2, they got the tired sprint mechanic, so all you just it's ingrained in our memory, just like the and or just like just the sprinting and everything. I get that with Nolan North as well. He's in so many things that like he changes his voice so much, but whenever he grunts, it's like or something climbing or whatever. I'm like, oh, that's Nolan. That's Nolan. I did the same thing with Ashley Johnson's performance. Like the giving birth scenes, the being out of breath from being chased or something. I'm just like, oh, it's Ellie. Couldn't help it. Um, but yeah, she's very pregnant in labor. Takes was the house she took cover in. Was that the same house as Ellie and Dina's house at the end of the game of part 2? I didn't see a single person mention it. The whole field and the house and even like the inside of it looked very similar. I did not see anyone mention it, but it looked very similar. I don't know if that was like a callback or something, but yeah, even though it was abandoned, it looked exactly like it. But whatever. So she gets bitten as she's giving birth and then cuts the cord, but Anna had already been infected. We find out the way Anna and Marlene know each other is they've been friends since they were children. And he's like, give Ellie this, names her Ellie, give her, what was it? She gives her the knife. And then, she wants Marlene to kill her, which she does. She didn't want to, but yeah. Yeah, it was a good scene. It was very, very good. I found it pretty, I don't know what else to say about it. It was just really, really good. I liked the origin story pretty much. To do like an origin story on the last episode of a season, I don't know. I think it worked. Because then it goes right back to where Ellie is. And shows you why Marlene had an interest in her from the very beginning. It was always just a pure coincidence that Ellie was the cure for humanity and Marlene was close to her already. But in media, coincidences happen all the time. And then we flash forward, and it's just Ellie and Joel on their way to the Fireflies, on their way to the hospital. Ellie obviously still traumatized from her encounter with David. And then right before there's the whole giraffe scene, which is straight from the game, which was nice. It's like, why would you? It's such a good scene. Why would you change it at all? So yeah. And then there was one little addition to the storytelling between the two. They used a real giraffe, by the way. I don't think for like the entirety of the scenes, but the ones where they were close, they used an actual giraffe. So props to HBO for that. There was one little addition where it was, what was it? Right before they get ambushed by the Fireflies, there was Joel finally tells Ellie where he got the scar from on his face. At first, he told her someone shot at me and missed. But then he tells her, I was the one who shot. So it adds a little bit of extra context to Joel's character. After Sarah, he tried to kill himself, which is not in the game at all. If it was in the game, it wasn't mentioned. Yeah, I think that was the best scene in the episode. And then it was what was the conversation between the two? Time. So what? Time heals all wounds, and then Joel's like, no, it was someone or something like that. I've only seen the episode once, and that was a couple weeks ago. But yeah, just a really good scene that I think you could argue was even better than the. Oh yeah, time didn't do it. Right? Yeah. Yeah, that was it. Really great scene. And then it just follows right into. I could go for some really shitty puns right now, or some. It was just nice. It really felt like them, Um, and then instead of them almost drowning and sneaking past 3 bloaters, 5 clickers, and 8 runners, they just get stun bombed by the fireflies, which is fine. The one tiny complaint I have about, not that, but later on, is I feel like Joel and Marlene's conversation was rushed. Maybe it's because, and I kind of feel that way about certain conversations throughout the show. Sometimes they just speak really quickly to each other. Not Joel, Ellie, or Marlene specifically, just characters. Sometimes conversed with each other very, very quickly, to the point it kind of felt and sounded unnatural. There was something about the Joel and Marlene conversation when Joel wakes up. There was something a little bit off about it. I'm not sure what. It was still good. It got all the information across. But what they talked about pretty much was the same. I don't think there was maybe it was meant to be. I don't think that line was in there, but they did add a bunch of it. Yeah, it was what was the reason she was, obviously it's because she was, her mother being infected while giving birth is the reason. She said basically cordyceps, think of her as cordyceps or something like that. And then the whole premise is the same, the reverse engineer a vaccine, but it grows all over the brain. It does. Find someone else, march him out of here. If he tries anything, shoot him. So all that was the same. It was done script-wise. It was done a little bit differently, but yeah. And then Joel went Rambo, which, man, he kills more people than I kill in the hospital in my runs. And yeah, since you talked about it, yeah, he went Joel Wick. He really did. I feel like this show clearly, and I've mentioned this before, went on a mission to cut out as much gameplay scenes as possible. But there are certain scenes where they kind of made up for it. The show had a big lack of infected. It did. It just straight up, it had a lack of infected. There was, in the first episode, there were a lot. In the museum, there were a lot. Then it took a break, and then there was just the horde of them coming out of the hole in the ground. And then there was nothing. I guess because they already cemented the threat that they pose. So they're, they already showed what they're capable of, so they didn't need to go too much further into it. You could look at it a couple different ways. How many more scenes would you have wanted? So I don't know. But the whole infected scene in episode 5 kind of it was so good, it kind of made up for the fact there weren't that many. The sniper scene, yeah. And you could argue that Joel not killing that many people was also kind of another side of it. We know he has in the past, but then they kind of made up for it again in the hospital. I didn't count how many people he kills, but almost all of them. But then, by the way, there was one person he wasn't able to kill and that was someone with a backpack and braids that ran away. I don't know if it's confirmed or not to be her, but Abby. But if it is, I think that's a really nice way of doing it. Because a little complaint he said it wasn't her. Really? That would have worked, though. I think that would have worked. Because a little complaint I've always had with part 2 was like so much of the game and the characters in part 2 were all made up. You know, it's like, surprise, they were in the hospital the whole time. Surprise. Yeah, I didn't care for that much. If that was her, I think that would have worked. You know, because then she knows what he looks like. Whatever. Then why was it just some random person running it? Maybe it's someone in her group. I don't know. I feel like that's going to come into play at some point in season 2. And then I like how quick the operating room scene was. Like, he didn't take his eyes off of Ellie the entire time. He saw the surgeon go for the scalpel, hold it up to him, and he just right then and there barely got 2 words in, just without even changing expressions. He's just unhook her. I liked just the deadness in his eyes and his face, and just that was his only literally nothing else was a priority for him, or just a care in the world except just getting her out of there. Nothing else mattered. It definitely showed off a more ruthless side. I liked it. And yes, one of the nurses was Laura Bailey. At first I had a theory that Abby was going to be one of the nurses. But upon thinking about it further, that makes no sense. I don't know. Like, at first when I saw it, I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if one of the nurses he spared was her? There was just a little, because they're clearly open to doing things differently in the show than in the game. But could have been her. Oh, that would have been good too. I don't know. But yeah, one of them was Laura Bailey, which was kind of funny. I love how they just put the cast in. Pretty much everyone was in the show except for Nolan. It's a shame. They said they didn't ask him anyway. But yeah, Joel's, I don't know, going full Rambo and everything definitely made it come across as like, just, you know, in the game, you're the one controlling him, and you're not given a choice of anything you do there. You can't just, like, it's not like Telltale. Do you leave or do you go for it? The choice is made for you. There's no way around it. But something about watching Joel massacre everyone in there, and just watching him again, like, you have no control. You just have to watch. It certainly made it seem more like he's the bad guy than in the game. Like, in the game, yeah, but you have a little bit of a harder time accepting that because you're the one doing all those things. But in the show, you just have to watch. So just seeing how many people he mowed down certainly feels a little bit different. They make it more in that morally gray. So yeah. No good or bad guy. Yeah. But if we were to go to one side or the other, the way it did it in the show certainly made Joel seem like a little bit more of a bad guy. That's the way I looked at it. Just a little bit more. And then the rest pretty much played out the same. The only extra scene was they unhooked her. She was bleeding out of where they put the needle in. She's like, clean that up or whatever. Just literally in full protection mode. Yeah. And then he takes her down in the parking garage. Marlene's there waiting for her, tries to talk him out of it. It literally is exactly the same. The rest is exactly the same as the game. Exactly the same. So there's not much more to mention. So yeah, and that was the show. In terms of video game adaptations, it's the greatest video game adaptation of all time. Whether it's from game to movie or game to show, it was the greatest video game adaptation of all time. But that's only because the source material was one of the best narratives in gaming history. You know, they very well could have messed it up very badly, but I think it was pretty good. And it was a good representation of what the game was to people who don't play games. So, yeah, that's the way I look at it. Again, the show would have a little bit more impact on me if I hadn't seen or played Last of Us for a long time. But I've literally been doing it nonstop for 8 years. So, in terms of my own enjoyment of it, the impact is a little lost because Last of Us is my entire life. So, um, yeah, it would have been nice to see him use like one Molotov. Some of like the in-game stuff was missing a little. Like, it wouldn't have been cool for him to just use one Molotov somewhere in the show, somewhere. Didn't get it, but whatever. Yeah, watching it a second time, I think that would be. I'll probably end up doing that because I don't know how many of my siblings watched the whole thing. I know they all started it. I don't know if they finished it. My dad's gonna start it as well. He was waiting for it all to air and then he'll watch it. But a brick or a bottle for just exactly. Yeah, stuff like that was missing. But yeah, I don't think it's up for debate. It's the best video game adaptation ever made. Then again, it wasn't up against some stiff competition because that genre of conversion has usually been a flop in the past. They're getting better, but this is the gold standard now. This is the gold standard. So yeah, that's about it. Now we look forward to season 2. Oh god. I might go into hiding. uh um but yeah, I'm probably not going to go back to playing part 2 until like the show. That way when I come back to it, we're going to stick with it for a while. Cuz people are always asking me like, "When are you going back to part 2? When are you going back to part 2?" It's like, "I don't know. We're busy with the remake right now and the PC port, which is very different from the PS5 version. And I want to go back to the original, and then we'll probably end up playing the multiplayer game that they release some point later this year. I would really rather return to part 2, like that and only that, for like around the time the TV show comes out. Go back to reclaiming some of my grounded records I've lost, lowering my times. That'd be cool. But yeah, that was the TV show. Very well done, HBO. Very well done. And yeah, I remember hearing that season 2 will have a lot more infected involved. I don't know if you realize this, but in terms of like enemies in part 2, the only enemies you fight in part 2 are infected all the way up through the school. I don't know if you realize that, but there are no human enemies in part 2 until the school, where the guy's choking out Dina and Ellie cuts her ropes to save her. So that's probably what they meant with regards to there being a lot more infected. Every enemy encounter is an infected up until the school. So, all right. That's about it. Sorry for the inconsistency of these uploads. I've been speedrunning a lot. Look at my eyes. I've been playing a lot. All right. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys. Bye.